I clawed my fingers into Ethan's chest, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath my trembling hands. The room was dim, the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting shadows on the walls. His breath was ragged, matching my own as we moved together in the quiet of the night. I could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath my palm, the rhythm of it pulling me closer, making me forget for a moment the weight of everything outside this room. His lips brushed against my neck, sending a shiver down my spine, and I arced into him, wanting to drown in the sensation, in the heat between us. Ethan's hands found my waist, pulling me closer, our bodies fitting together as if they had been made for this, for each other. Every touch, every brush of his fingertips ignited something deep within me, something I hadn't felt in years. There was no hesitation between us now, only a desperate need to feel, to be connected in a way that transcended words. The world outside, the complications of my life, my marriage, all of it faded as I melted into him. His mouth moved to meet mine, the kiss deep, intense, filled with unspoken promises and the longing that consumed me. As we moved together, the quiet sounds of the night enveloped us, a contrast to the chaos building inside me. I felt alive in his arms, more alive than I had in a long time. I remember the moment my life started to unravel, the summer when everything fell apart. It was the summer I met Ethan. Ted, my husband, was the one who brought him into our lives, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that neither of us could have anticipated. I never planned on things turning out the way they did, but then again, life never goes according to plan, does it? It was a bright, hot morning when Ted told me about Ethan. "I'm hiring a young assistant," Ted had said nonchalantly over breakfast, as if it were just another day. "He's a writer, wants to learn the craft. He'll be staying with us for the summer." I nodded, not giving it much thought at the time. I had long since stopped caring about Ted's comings and goings. Our marriage, once passionate and full of life, had faded into something unrecognizable after the accident. The one that took our 2 sons, the one I could never talk about. I knew from the start that Ethan was smitten with Ted. He admired him, studied his work, and followed him around like a lost puppy. I could see the awe in his eyes whenever Ted spoke. But Ted, as usual, was more preoccupied with his own thoughts, his own life. He barely noticed Ethan's admiration, and if he did, he brushed it off with the same detached air he had adopted for years. But I noticed everything about Ethan. His youthful energy, his eagerness to please, and the quiet sadness he tried to hide but couldn't. At first, I kept my distance. I wasn't looking for anything. I was lost in my own grief, consumed by the memories of Tim and Tom, our boys. I had never recovered from losing them, and neither had Ted. He had thrown himself into work, writing stories, sketching models, and pretending everything was fine. I had retreated into myself, hiding in plain sight, going through the motions of being a wife and mother to Ruth, our only child left. But then, Ethan started paying attention to me in ways Ted hadn't for years. It began innocently enough. Ethan and I would talk during quiet moments when Ted was busy. He was sweet, respectful, and curious about my life. One evening, After Ted had retreated to his study, Ethan and I sat by the lake watching the sunset. The air was warm, the sky ablaze with fiery oranges and reds. I don't know what came over me, but in that moment, something shifted. Ethan leaned in just slightly and I felt my pulse quicken. I hadn't felt that alive in years. And before I knew it, we were kissing. The kiss was electric, sending shivers down my spine. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt wanted, needed. Ted had been distant for so long, and I had been drowning in my loneliness. Ethan was my lifeline, and I clung to him, desperate for something, anything that would make me feel whole again. Ethan's hands found my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. His touch was tender, but urgent, as if he was afraid that if he let go, the moment would slip away. I could feel the heat radiating from him, warming me from the inside out. We stumbled back toward the bed, our breaths coming in shallow, uneven gasps. When our lips met again, the world outside vanished. There was nothing but the soft rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my hand and the quiet intimacy we had found in each other. We lay there, wrapped in the safety of the night, every touch sending shivers down my spine. His fingers traced patterns in my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. The weight of everything, the guilt, the loneliness, the years of emotional distance from Ted faded into the background. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about the consequences or the heartbreak that would inevitably follow. All that mattered was the way Ethan looked at me, the way he made me feel like I was the only person in the world. We became lovers after that night, sneaking around behind Ted's back. It was thrilling, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Ethan made me laugh, made me forget the pain for just a little while. We would meet in secret, sharing stolen moments in the fields or by the lake. He told me about his dreams, his fears, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with Ted for years. But there was always the shadow of guilt hanging over us, the knowledge that what we were doing was wrong. Ted had his affairs too, of course. I wasn't blind to that. But what Ethan and I had felt different. It felt real. One night, Ruth, our sweet, innocent Ruth, almost caught us. She had a bad dream and came into my room, where Ethan and I had been talking. We weren't doing anything wrong at that moment, but the tension was thick in the air, and Ruth could sense it. She looked at us with those big questioning eyes, and I felt a pang of guilt, so sharp it nearly knocked the breath out of me. I managed to calm her down and send her back to her room, but the weight of what I was doing began to crush me. The turning point came when Ted confronted Ethan. I had thought Ted was too wrapped up in his own life to notice what was happening between Ethan and me, but I had underestimated him. One afternoon, while Ethan was driving Ted to one of his lover's houses, Ted began to speak, his voice low and dangerous. He knew everything, and in that moment, the bubble of our affair burst. Ted wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. He was disappointed, resigned. He had always been the one in control, but now, for the first time, I saw him as vulnerable. He told Ethan to leave, fired him on the spot. But before Ethan left, Ted said something that shook me to my core. "Maren," he said, his voice soft but firm. You've always been the one who understood me, even now, after everything. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. Those words haunted me. I had spent so many years angry at Ted, resenting him for the distance between us, for the way he had shut down after the accident. But in that moment, I realized that I had shut down too. I had pushed him away just as much as he had pushed me. And now, after everything, we were both broken, both lost. Ethan left the next day, and I watched him go, feeling the loss deeply. I had loved him in my own way, but I knew it could never last. Ted and I had too much history, too much pain binding us together. In the end, I couldn't leave him. Not like this. Ted needed me, and in this strange, twisted way, I needed him too. As I stood by the window, watching Ethan drive away, I felt the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. I had made mistakes, so many mistakes, but now I had to live with them. Ted and I were still here, still together, but everything had changed. We were no longer the same people we once were. And as much as I wanted to believe that things could go back to the way they were before, deep down, I knew they never would.